and expressed their rage in a way that said, this must not stand. We must have justice. We in Minnesota must do everything we can to protect and lift that voice up. We must do everything we can to create the space where that can happen, and it will happen today. But I want to be very clear. What started out as a community and a state trying to make ourselves better and understand where we failed, to demand justice and express righteous anger, has morphed into something very, very different. What we've seen on the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul over the last 48 to 72 hours has nothing to do with what these people have done to build Minnesota. We have had wanton destruction of black businesses and black infrastructure. We have destroyed landmarks of the nation's largest indigenous communities that ripped a hole in the soul of a people that have been oppressed from the minute we became a state. We stand on the land of the people who created that, and the people who were on the streets last night burned it down. They are not us. They do not share our values. They destroyed our public libraries and our public infrastructure. The chaos created stopped us from delivering school meals to hundreds of thousands of hungry children across this state at a time of COVID-19. They want nothing to do with the decency. They want nothing to do with what we strive for. They can't say the name Philando Castile because they don't know the history. They're not here to make that difference. This group is. So as Minnesotans, don't listen to me. Listen to these voices. I listen to them. As a white man who walks through life with that privilege, walk in these shoes. Walk in these communities. They took me in. They set me down. They challenge me when I'm wrong. They teach me what it looks like, and they advocate for change and try and hold me accountable. When I fail them, they tell me. When we succeed together as truly one Minnesota. And so with that, as a group of mentors here, none more important to me, someone who stands for the first time in 8 weeks in the same room, my friend, a leader in this community, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Buju, Peggy Flanagan, and Dishnakaz, Babagan, Ganikag, and Dunchaba, Mangan and Dodame. My name's Peggy Flanagan. I'm Lieutenant Governor of the state of Minnesota, and I'm a member of the White Earth Nation of Ojibwe. And my family is the Wolf Clan. And the role of our clan is to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And that work could not be more important than this moment that we find ourselves in right now. As we've come together as community, it has been tremendously difficult to not reach out and to embrace each other, because as we were watching our communities fall apart, the moment to connect, the moment to physically touch and care for one another is one of the things that we are prevented from doing right now. But because of the importance of this moment, as the governor mentioned, this is the first time that we have been in the room together because it matters that much. Now, before I became lieutenant governor, I was an organizer. And I was an organizer for 20 years. And when there are protests in the street, I was there. I marched behind Valerie Castile as we mourned the unjust loss of her son. And my heart and my guts are being ripped out in this moment as I also want to go to the streets. And what we've experienced in the loss and the murder on camera of our community member, George Floyd, is horrific. And that space on 38th in Chicago is sacred ground. And people should be able to come together on that sacred ground and mourn and grieve and demand change and justice in policing and every other racist system that we have that has been part of this state. But in this moment, we cannot. Because there are detractors. There are white supremacists. There are anarchists. There are people who are burning down the institutions that are core to our identity and who we are. As a member of the urban American Indian community, watching the destruction of McGizzy, an institution in our community that has been the foundation for organizing, for education, for opportunity, for building community together, is no longer there. We did not do that. We have been coming together to take care of our community. And so, this is what I ask of all of you. We need to create the space for people to be able to grieve, to come together, to mourn the loss of George Floyd. But in order to be able to do that, we need to create the space to remove the people who are doing us harm. We've watched communities step up and come together to clean the streets, to feed one another. And that is what we need to do here. One of the ways that we can care for community is to stay home tonight. Is to stay home tonight so that we can remove those folks who are harming us. So that we can remove those folks who are detracting from the memory of George Floyd and for the work that we have to do to ensure justice is done and to ensure that the 3 additional officers are held accountable. But we cannot do that until community can gather safely. So I am grateful to be in this space with all of you, to be at home as we are together in community. And it is time for us to call on each other as organizers to stay home so that we can make sure that we have the opportunity to retain our community and to be able to rebuild and recover together and do all the work that we can in the Capitol building behind us to undo these systems of racism and to move policies forward that are truly just. This swell of mourning and grief has been just below the surface, and it burst out into public. And we must take this moment to change it all. To change it all. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you our Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you, Governor. And it's just, those words were incredible. And you think the heart of your community now, mourning. And with us today are these faith leaders. I've been at their churches and their synagogues and their mosques, and it is usually a moment of joy that brings us together, of worship. And today you will hear from them about where they are, and that is that everyone is in pain. It is Martin Luther King who once said, that we are all tied, inextricably tied in a single garment of destiny. And what connects one of us connects all of us. And that's how we felt, all of us, and anyone with an ounce of humanity when we see the video of George Floyd's murder, when we see that his life literally evaporating before our eyes. We remember when we see that we are all inextricably tied. But we also, as we see the destruction of these sacred sites in the American Indian community, in our African American community, when we see the businesses that literally represent small businesses, people's lives and hopes and dreams torn apart, destroyed, and torched, we remember that we are also inextricably tied at that moment, and that there are so many good people in our community that had every right to show their voice and speak, but not violently and not destructively. That is not what we are about. I saw the statistics this morning as the governor laid things out for our state about how so many of the people that have been arrested are not from our state. They are not from our state. So people of goodwill that feel like I do so strongly about the wrong and injustice we saw in that video have to understand that some of these people that are coming over and doing this are not doing it for the good reasons that bring you to the streets to protest. They're doing it for bad reasons. They're not part of our state, and they're coming from the outside. So what we are asking today is that people of goodwill, people who believe in justice, people of faith, of all faiths in our community, that they stand together and they actually stay at home, but stand together in that way. We've been through a period of isolation already through this pandemic, and we know that we can't gather like we once did. But today and tonight, the gatherings and some of those people that are part of it, it is not for goodwill. So we are simply asking peaceful people that want to honor the legacy of George Floyd, that want to honor the legacy of justice, that they stay home. That would be a start. And from there, we rebuild our community. We heal. We make sure that justice is done. We enact the criminal justice reforms that we know are necessary. I was thinking about, as I looked at our rabbis and imams and reverends up here, of this old Walt Whitman poem, I hear America singing the varied songs I hear, the varied voices I hear. There are voices up here that come from very different religions, but they are all saying the same thing. There are local leaders that have been at the front lines for their people, and they want to hear their congregation sing again, but the only way we can have peace is if we all find it within us. Parents calling their kids, that'd be a great idea. Kids calling their parents today, what should I do? What's the best way to seek justice? Families talking to each other. And then we can move forward as a community. But we cannot move forward when people are burning down our city, burning down our state. That is what we are united behind today. Thank you. I think it may be our fantastic Attorney General who's been a voice of justice, Keith Ellison.
Friends, I want to be real clear. We need your help to comply with the curfew, straight up. If anybody's unclear about what we're asking for, that is what we're asking for. Okay, why? Because the people who are trying to tarnish the reputation of the noble protest for justice are out there trying to mix in with the crowd so that people will just say, oh, look at all those protesters are bad. Their cause can't be just. They're just out there causing trouble. We know that's not what's happening. We know that the noble, just aims of the protesters are righteous and good. But we also know that some evil elements are literally interfusing themselves with the protests to destroy and cause arson so that the whole community will have a low opinion of the protest, because they're not for justice for Mr. Floyd. They're against it. And they know that if we protest righteously and peacefully and justly, their public sentiment will rise up to support our demands. They want to stop that. And so we need people to help us get off the streets. You can go on social media, you can protest there, you can do all these things, but to be on the street after 8 means that we can't get you separated from the bad people. So we know you're brave, we know you're strong, we know you never compromise on justice, we know you're righteous, and we believe in what you're doing, but we need to be able to stop the burning and the looting and the destruction. I want to let you know, we had some great leaders around this room. I know them all, love them all. And I want to speak to the protesters. I love you. Many of them wanted to be here today. When we called them, they said, hey, we're with the governor. We believe in what you're doing. But we're on the streets trying to restore order and to raise the issue of George Floyd. So we can't come in because we're on the street. But we want you to know that we're with you. That is a fact. So as I take my seat, look, one officer has been arrested, charged with murder. It's a preliminary complaint. It's still going on. As a lawyer, I can tell you complaints are amended. Charges could be increased. There could be some added. There might be other people who will be charged as well. We're in the beginning of this. As a signal to you that we know that there is probable cause to support this complaint, and the wheels of justice are moving, and now they're moving swiftly. But we need you to help us make sure that justice is done. And we know that, yes, we will invest to rebuild our communities. What in the world is burning down Migizi or Juxtaposition Arts on the north side have to do with justice for Floyd? Nothing. So let me take my seat, because better voices than mine can tell you about the urgency, but I want to be clear. We're asking for you to let the National Guard have the street after 8 so that we can make sure that we restore order and build justice. And with that, I want to invite my dear friend and yours, Reverend Dr. Chavez Russell.
Good afternoon, Minnesota. My name is Reverend Dr. Chavez Russell of Greater Friendship Missionary Baptist Church and the Minnesota State Baptist Convention. And as a native of Mississippi and a resident of Minnesota for the last 20 years, and an African-American, successful African-American man, I can tell you that I feel the pain, felt the pain growing up, felt the pain throughout college, going to a 95% evangelical white college, moving to Minnesota, experiencing that same systematic pain, and the pain against our own people. And how I get through it is the same way that my ancestors have gotten through it over the last 400 years. And that is coming together and leaning and depending on the power of God. Every moment in our history where we face this type of destruction, face this type of attack, we came together leaning and depending on the power of God. And when I see our community right now, when I see people cleaning up, when I see people offering food, when I see people offering to deliver food and do whatever needs to be done to overcome this evil, because that's what it is. Because our Bible says that we battle not against flesh and blood. We're battling against evil. So I'm calling on the believers in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the people of God in general, regardless of what background you come from, to stand for love, because God is love. Continue to come together. Continue to fight against this evil that we face today that's trying to tarnish the name of George Floyd. So yes, I am asking that we do protest and use our voices loudly to represent love and the power of God and justice, so that we can make the systematic changes so that my kids don't feel the same pain that I felt for the last 41 years. So yes, we are asking that you go home at 8 o'clock and pray. And I need somebody that believes in the power of prayer to get on your knees tonight so that we can give room to our government that's been working so hard with us, partnering with us. Give them the room to separate the good from the bad. Separate those that are standing for justice versus those that are standing to tear down our government and all of our institutions and all of our neighborhoods and all of our things that we do to take care of our community. We ask that you give them the room and pray. And just like our ancestors have done, lean and depend on the power of God. And once we do that, we can begin this healing process, because I don't know about you, but I believe in Minnesota. And I believe we will rebuild. I know we will. Rebuild our institutions, rebuild our relationships with our youth, rebuild our relationships with our law enforcement, rebuild our relationships with our government, and rebuild our beloved community to honor the name of George Floyd. Amen. And with that being said, I want to introduce Rabbi Aaron Weininger to the podium. Thank you.
My name is Rabbi Aaron Weininger. I'm a rabbi at the Adath Yeshurun congregation in Minnetonka, and with Rabbi Jill Crimmings, one of the co-chairs of the Minnesota Rabbinical Association. We must fight the pandemic of racism with the same resolve, tenacity, and compassion that we are fighting COVID-19. There is no excuse to do anything different as we remember the memory of George Floyd as a blessing. You might ask how we might do that work of fighting this pandemic of racism. In our sacred scripture as a Jewish people, the Torah, we read in Deuteronomy, "Justice, justice, you shall pursue." The rabbis pose the question, why is the word justice repeated twice? Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice. I want to suggest that we repeat the word justice twice because we have to name and call out the injustice in front of us, the current moment that we're in, the horrible murder of George Floyd. Name it for what it is, the brutality, the racism, calling out that first justice clearly and unambiguously. And that second justice, that second use of the word justice, is for us to reflect how we do that. How we do that as Minnesotans, how we do that as people of faith, how we commit to that, certainly as a Jewish community across this great state, how we commit to justice, how we make sure to sideline those who are undermining that very, very first pursuit of justice, how we make sure to call out the injustice of white supremacy, how we call out the injustice of those from outside of our state who are perverting that call for justice. So that when we say justice, justice, you shall pursue in the Torah, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, that we are clear and unambiguous about this current moment of justice that calls us to rise in peace, that calls us to stay home tonight. And that second form of justice, that we remember how to dismantle the systems of racism that have brought us to this point. And that we turn to our allies, and that we ourselves in the Jewish community serve as allies and witnesses of this moment. And so we call out to the Holy One of Blessing by calling out to one another, justice, justice, may each of us pursue. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Emilia Gonzalez Avalos.
Thank you, everybody, for their words of wisdom and resilience. My name is Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, and I'm an executive director of Navigate Unidos Minnesota. And our organization is based in Lake and Bloomington, right on the second floor of Mercado Central, that place where a lot of people call the heart of the Latino community. And I want to speak about the heart of the Latino community and the Latino community that I know and love and that I'm part of. Yesterday, I saw public demonstrations of love and solidarity with a clear and deep consciousness that the struggle that took many to the streets is righteous, that we need to solve the very old problem of inequality. And for that, we need everybody and everybody's voices. What I saw were small business owners, Black and brown, Indigenous, Somali, Mexican, Salvadorians, taking care of the little legacies and their little businesses that are the lifelines for many of our community. What I saw were forms of public love when they brought tables to the streets with water and food and emergency aid kits and Band-Aids and kind words for people that were passing by. I witnessed deep love for the community of Lake Street. But I also saw another story. I saw folks that nobody recognized as our neighbors, as our colleagues, or the people that have been in the movement and that have shown up for one another for the years that we have been involved, that we're looking for opportunities to cause more harm and pain in places where there's already harm and pain by structural racism, inequality, and carelessness. And I will speak now directly to the community that I'm part of, that I'm accountable to, and that I love. Querida comunidad, necesitamos que hoy se quede en su casa y que le pida a sus jóvenes, a sus vecinos y a sus familiares que viven en la calle Lake, que por favor tome precauciones si hay niños o ancianos o gente vulnerable que tenga que salir. Le pedimos que no salga y que no tome parte hoy de los levantamientos. Le pedimos que se cuide, que cuide a su familia y que cuide a su comunidad. Que somos una comunidad resiliente, fuerte, hermosa, y que siempre hemos salido de cosas difíciles. Y también de esta vamos a salir juntos. I'm just asking folks to not participate tonight, to stay at home, to support the vulnerable, the the children that live around the perimeter of Lake Street, to ask if there's a relative that they can talk to, or if they want to call us, so that we can help them move away from the area. That we will work together and work hard to recover the heart of the Latino community that we share with so many other communities. I want to give a special recognition, a special shout out to the folks of the American Indian movement that were so present yesterday, supporting and defending and taking care of each other and one another. To the indigenous community of Little Earth, you guys know how to love, and we felt that. Thank you so much for that. And thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alfred Babington Johnson. I am the CEO of the Stair Step Foundation and the convener of His Works United, which is the largest coming together ecumenically of African American churches and the Nation of Islam. This moment that we're in is such a poignant and pregnant moment, and it seemed to me that the wisdom of the moment for me comes out of Romans 14 and 16. And it says simply, don't let your good be evil spoken of. For me, this time that we're in, facing this pandemic that has ravaged our community horribly, in the midst of that darkness, we've seen so many bright lights. We've seen our churches come together, Reverend McAfee at New Salem feeding hundreds of people, Reverend Ronnie Patterson in St. Paul, James Thomas, Bruce Carpenter, feeding folk in the midst of this and reaching out to support people who might feel alone and estranged in this season. And so horrible, but wonderful. And then this last Monday evening, a moment that has to be forever etched on the consciousness of anyone who saw the video of this brutal act of inhumanity and murder. More graphic, I think, than anything that I've ever seen. And out of that came an outrage, a moment of outrage and enlightenment. And an opportunity for all of us to say, no, this must stop. This injustice, this racism, this police brutality must stop. And then we saw a bright light come out of that, because early Tuesday morning, Chief Arredondo and Mayor Fry called together Black clergy and activists and shared with us their concerns of the moment, told us about the FBI and the BCA, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and their work. And the community turned to the mayor and the chief and said, but we're looking at you. We're looking at what you're going to do. And they responded in an unprecedented fashion. We asked that they terminate those officers. They hadn't the ability then to try and execute them, but terminate them. And they responded, we will do this. This is the right thing to do. And so out of that horrific moment came another season in which we stood together with the chief and the mayor and could stand around him with gang leadership and community activists all saying together, this we agree together must stop. We're going to change it and justice must come forward. And so then the protests, the comings together to say, okay, charge them, try them. And out of that, as the police were there facing all kinds of instigators, the Black community stood between the police and the agitators to say, no, peacefully, yes. But no, you must not antagonize, throw rocks, and what have you. And so there was a great kind of unity in the spirit of the community coming out of this. And then acts of arson, unfortunate lootings, in a season in which we have the pandemic and unemployment. What is the sense and what would the strategy be to destroy the Cub Foods on Broadway or on Lake Street so that folk in the community don't have any place to go to get food? And more than that, who's working in those stores who are now unemployed? That's not an act of justice for George Floyd. That's an outrage. Don't let your good be evil spoken of. All the efforts to get justice that were legitimate are now shrouded and distorted by actions that are not of our community. So when the governor, who's been working with us wonderfully, and the Commissioner of Public Safety, who's been working with us wonderfully, and supporting the cause of justice, are now saying, we see things happening here that shouldn't be. And the only way we can deal with them is if those who are doing good won't allow evil to be spoken of our good. Yes, we must honor this curfew because this situation must be dealt with. So we encourage you, as requested, don't let your good be evil spoken of. Don't let it be distorted. Honor this curfew, that this may come to a conclusion. We're delighted that the junior senator, state of Minnesota, Tina Smith.
I stand here with humility, with love for my beloved community, with commitment to do justice for George Floyd, with a painful awareness of the hard work ahead in our community to root out the racism that is too much a part of our state. And I stand here with anger at the evil that is destroying and burning and desecrating the community that we love so much. I am here to listen to these community leaders, to take your counsel, and to ask my fellow Minnesotans to raise up your voices in righteous protest. That is how we change this state and this country so that it is worthy of all of us. And then I ask you to go home by 8 so that we can keep our neighbors and ourselves and our beautiful community safe. I would now like to welcome Mary Merrill up to the podium.
Thank you. I come this afternoon, with a heavy heart. And it's heavy because I represent an organization. My name is Mary Merrill, and I represent an organization by the name of Sabathani. And over 50 years ago, Sabathani rose out of the turmoil and the journey that we were moving forward in this country for civil rights, for fairness, for liberty, for justice in our community. And it feels so much right now like that time. I was just a teenager or just a student over at the University of Minnesota. And so it's particularly painful what we've been going through. We've continued to go through stuff for sure, but to have this young man brutally and coldly with a cold heart, just murdered. And to have that in front of our eyes was just so painful and so hurtful to many in my community, and I think across the city. And as we gathered to say one more time, as we've gathered so much in the recent years, we won't be stopped. We won't let this continue to happen in our community. We gathered one more time to say how we were going to prevent this from happening. It was, in some cases, just a little too much. And so there was the rage to say, we've done this before. When will it end? How can we change things? And as we began to gather together to gain the strength that we needed from each other to face